I don't think that role is going to be successful if it's built in a silo. It will only be successful when it is integrated across technologies and integrated across like other functions. AI is going to need some pretty hard governance for it to be regulated, for it to have certain guardrails. How do you bring efficiency in using some of the AI technology? Because most agencies are struggling with workforce. AI is going to be part of anything and everything that we do. So may as well get ahead of it and train, because there has to be some level of organizational readiness.
Welcome to the CAIO podcast, where we delve deep into the world of chief AI officers, exploring their journeys, insights, and challenges in steering AI initiatives within their organizations. I'm your host, Sanjay Puri, and today we are honored to have Nikhil Deshpande with us today. Nikhil is the Chief AI Officer for the Georgia Technical Authority. Nikhil has been at the forefront of driving AI innovation and adoption within the state of Georgia, and we are excited to learn from his invaluable insights and experiences. On this episode, we'll explore Nikhil's journey to becoming a Chief AI Officer and the challenges and opportunities that come with this role. So get ready to be inspired and informed as we embark on this insightful conversation. Nikhil, welcome to the CAIO podcast.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to speak about the most burning topic that everyone cannot escape without mentioning at least like once in every conversation. So happy to have this chat with you.
Wonderful. Nikhil, as I mentioned to you, our audience is global. They're AI leaders, enthusiasts, policymakers, etc. And obviously, as you said, it's the most burning topic. So to begin with, we start by how do we inspire others who want to follow your footsteps? Then we go into attracting folks who might want to join your organization, and then ultimately it's about collaboration and communication too. So as far as inspiring, can you tell our listeners about your journey, how you came about this role?
Yeah. So, of course, we all can attest to the fact that like none of us are doing anything for a living for what we went back to college or what we were studied growing up. And AI is one of those things where I never imagined I'll be in this role, but I'm so glad that I am. And it essentially all just evolved in a way that I am still doing, and AI is an added responsibility to my existing role, which was the chief digital officer for the state of Georgia. My organization, Georgia Technology Authority, when it is a centralized technology arm for the state of Georgia agencies. So all the Georgians that avail the state services, every agency that is required to provide those services, they partner with my agency. When a couple Novembers ago, when I think Gen AI as a concept got on everyone's radar, and AI slowly became, or rather overnight became, a conversation topic again. Just seeing what Gen AI was capable of, and again, this was back then, so it was pretty much very much textual. It was quite apparent that organizations needed to have some sort of a authority over how we deal with this, how we handle this. And thankfully, my boss, the state CIO, Shanzia Thomas, she realized that we needed to do that immediately, and I'm happy and thankful that she turned to me, and she said that you are going to be it, because up until then I was proactively doing some research myself and sharing it across my peer group, and just be like, hey guys, this is what's coming, this is at the horizon, we need to be aware of this is how things are going to be affected, influenced by this. Obviously AI being AI, there are going to be good actors, there are going to be bad actors. So as a government organization, we have to be aware of that, and we have to be prepared to what we plan on doing things. So I think thankfully she probably saw that I was building up to, I guess, that role, and in my mind I was really not doing that for that, but I just naturally, I guess it's in me to get gravitated towards something that is such a big thing that will be affecting what everything will be doing. So even in the past, like whenever like mobile became big, I immediately realized, and we were like, well, how can we now be serving our digital properties in this new mobile world where like people are going to be walking with phones and expecting all of these services over phones. So this is really kind of, I would say, a story that I have talked to a lot of my peers as well, and I still have to meet someone across at least the state spectrum where someone is purely hired for an AI role, an AI job. A lot of us are like added with that responsibility, and I think because it matters for someone within the state to lead this as opposed to someone who is coming in with purely the technology, as part of their focus. Up here, I think I am more concerned about like how do we use AI as a tool, but don't forget the focus of service delivery.
Nikhil, you said some very, very important things. So, if I may just follow on, there are a lot of maybe CIOs and CTOs who are double hatted or triple hatted in some cases and are doing this. Now, the federal government with the OMB has said that every agency in the federal government has to have a chief AI officer. That's not happened yet in the state level, but obviously, it's something that you have taken on. That leads me to the question, should every state have a chief AI officer designated? And then, if you can tell our audience, what are your roles and responsibilities as a chief AI officer? We understand you were the chief digital officer, which is a job in itself. So, two basic questions.
As far as the role of AI, I mean, you're right. OMB, released that report, and that was a big suggestion where every federal agency is going to need to have their own chief AI officer. Now, if you look at it from that lens across the states, so individually within a state, if every agency starts having that, I do feel like it really depends on where that position sits and how that role is crafted. Because I don't think that role is going to be successful if it's built in a silo. It will only be successful when it is integrated across technologies and I mean integrated across like other functions that work with services. Of course, also AI being a much larger tent, we have to then also figure out like what are we actually applying it towards. Are we focusing on external facing technology, if external technical services, or are we looking at our internal workforce and augmentation of using AI for better just efficiencies? So a lot of that depends on where that position sits. I think it's important to, at least now, recognize that AI is important enough that it needs its place and it needs some sort of a guideline, some sort of regulation before it is too late to be able to do that. In most of the states that I have seen, and you're right, there are very few states who actually have this as an official position. My role as the AI officer is really to kind of build and get a program going within the state of Georgia as far as building the AI program. Now, what does that constitute? Um, what we are building towards is a program that partners with state agencies and vendor partners who are within the AI space. And we create a kind of like an innovation pad that allows those partnerships to focus on some key issues where we can apply some of these newer technology, be it AI, or it need not always be generative AI, but it could be any other flavors of AI, or it could be really something that they could use that platform to just solve a problem, right? But since AI is bringing everyone together to kind of huddle and see how we can fix things. We do want to use this opportunity to try and see as much as we can make a difference in solving some of these business problems that are out there. Um, so there are three different streams, I would say, to this AI program for the state of Georgia. The first one is a governance framework. We can all agree that AI is going to need some pretty hard governance for it to be regulated, for it to have certain guardrails. So we have put together an AI advisory council. Now, that council constitutes some state agency CIOs, some educational organizations locally within Georgia, and some private sector experts. The focus of this council, and again, like a council and strike team and some of these terms may seem very much government speak, but I think it is very important to kind of have some level of guardrails set before we actually get into the implementation and experimentation phase of this. So the council will be really responsible to set these guardrails, these standards and policies and guidelines across technical implementation, across ethical implementation. Just to give you an example, one of the deliverables we have identified is an ethics playbook. You can also call it like a DNA guide, where at least in Georgia, we do not have that across the enterprise, but we have partnered with University of North Georgia. They have Truist Center for Ethical Leadership, and very fortunate to be partnering with Dr. Rose Proctor, who leads that organization. And collectively, we are working on a playbook that eventually will be able to make it available for other state agency organizations or also local government. And what this does is really just kind of gives you a certain set of lenses that any implementation, any technology is looked through from an ethical lens. And, basic things which today we are purely looking at as technology brings up certain ethical questions about, like, what is the data that we are collecting today? Do we need to collect everything that we are asking for? And then when we have it, what are we doing with it? We are already seeing some AI implementations across in the world. I wouldn't say in the US, but that have given us pause. You may have heard about these. I think it's in China, smart courts, where for small causes there are AI algorithms that basically just give you a verdict on your case being submitted, and it's an algorithm that understands the case, and then it basically gives you what it thinks should happen. And the human in the loop is a judge, but if the judge disagrees with that verdict, it's extra paperwork for the judge to explain why. And off the bat, that causes burden on anyone, and they would be less likely to have a true just verdict coming out of that. So when we are seeing some of these, and again, it's a different country, I understand it's a different culture, but when we are seeing some of these examples prop up, we are just reminded that there is a possibility that something like this can happen, or maybe not at that magnitude, but even if it's something that is at a much lower scale, a different level, but having that ethical design overlay on what you're planning as a service is going to be very critical. And that's exactly what the playbook is going to be, offering these organizations. And then, there are other administrative things like having an AI inventory of all the AI systems we have across the state. We might not have many generative AI systems, but we definitely have some of the traditional, AI, like deep learning, machine learning in the past, like analytical AI systems, that do many things. But it would be a good opportunity to gauge how far off is an algorithm from an actual decision being made. And then if there is a human in the loop in those decisions. So those are some of the things that that particular governance framework is, essentially going to be focused on. The other lane for the program is innovation lab. In this lab, what I was talking about earlier is this private partner, public-private partnership, where agencies can focus on getting their business problems solved. And I know that there are so many qualified vendors out there who can actually play a big role in something. And having said this in a centralized form also helps us as an organization to maybe also reuse some of the technologies that we have implemented. So we don't use 5 or 6 different models for the same use case just across 5 different organizations. So a lot of that has happened in the past. So off the bat, we're using this opportunity to streamline that. And as this lab, it's going to be a dynamic space where it's going to be a physical and a virtual space. But we already have started some work in a virtual sense where we partnered with some of our state agencies, someone like Equal Opportunity Commission, and we were lucky to partner with the Aspen Institute to collectively come and have some initial strategy sessions for how do you bring efficiency in using some of the AI technology, because most agencies are struggling with workforce. The budgets are shrinking. There are fewer people inclined to work in certain positions than what it used to be a few years ago. So off the bat, there are several challenges. And if AI technology can actually relieve some of that pressure, then we want to make sure we use that. So some of the lab work has already begun, and we are really excited to kind of be able to do that truly, because it brings that innovation focus into government, which may sound like an oxymoron in many cases, but it is important because we want that agility, and we want workforce to work in a way that is not that different from the private sector, because our challenges are very similar. I mean, our focus is obviously different, but our challenges as far as technology, as far as our end users, they're all the same. So we are hoping to do that, hoping to initiate that and work on it. And third, last but not the least, is an AI literacy program, where we create some sort of training, some sort of upskilling within the workforce. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. AI is going to be part of anything and everything that we do. So may as well get ahead of it and train, because there has to be some level of organizational readiness before we start interacting and leveraging some of these future-facing technology products. So, do that sooner than later. So this is just the AI program in Georgia in a nutshell.
Well, it's a lot. And just to quickly summarize, there is a governance framework where you have agency heads or CIOs, and then you have external experts and academics in there. And also, I want you to, at the end, we have listeners from overseas also, give them a brief snippet of size of Georgia and things like that, because you and I kind of take Georgia, Atlanta, and all those other things for granted. We have listeners in Asia, Europe, etc., who might not. Georgia Peach is very well known, but so anyway, my point was that there is an innovation hub. Uh, are you partnered with companies? Are you doing any open source partnerships? So that's one question, and then I'll come to the third question about upskilling, because that's, to me, also a very important question. So if you can just talk about what kind of partnerships do you have? Are there any open source partnerships, and what is Georgia's view on open source? And a little snippet of what Georgia is.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, let me start with the overall, I guess, just 101 for Georgia, for the international community. I think more than anything, they probably would recognize the association of Georgia or Atlanta with Coca-Cola. and that being such a global brand. So Georgia being one of the kind of major southeastern states, population is just around 12 million, and out of which almost more than 50% reside around the Atlanta area. So when I say Atlanta area, the city of Atlanta actually is quite small, but the area, the metropolitan area, is quite large. A lot of people joke that pretty much the rest of Georgia at some point is going to be a suburb of Atlanta, and it's might not be that untrue because it's expanding so much. But Georgia is very diverse. Atlanta, the metro area, is obviously very much savvy, and we have, I think, when you talk about Atlanta, I would probably say there are more transplants than native folks who live like in the metro area, which is quite the case with most of the metro cities. But when you go outside, that's when you actually get to see like the beauty of the state. You have mountains, you have ocean, then you have farmlands, you have swamps in the southern area. So overall, Georgia is quite a diverse. For one state to have all of this, it's quite a diverse state. And of course, Atlanta, is a city, and we enjoy all the aspects that a city can bring. And I would not do my job if I don't pitch our airport as being one of the world's busiest airports. So I would say everyone has been through Atlanta, maybe not to Atlanta, but they have changed flights in Atlanta. So, having said all of this, Georgia, like the dynamic is challenging because you have several people leaning and using state services for various reasons, right? So, the private public partnership, what we are envisioning, and this is actually, we are working on this right now, literally as this is being recorded. So we may have done this by the time this is released. I don't know this podcast, this episode, but we have certain procurement vehicles to engage with private sector vendors. One of them is to pre-qualify a certain set of vendors. So what we are doing is we have um, listed certain swim lanes within the larger AI tent, and then we will be releasing some of these procurement vehicles, and it will be out for bid. And we hope to hear and have people, vendors, bid on this, and then we will pick and choose to make sure we populate all of the streams evenly, and have a good, healthy, all-rounded set of vendor pools across all the swim lanes within the AI category. So just like conversational AI, for example, like voice assistants, or like we or like analytical. Like, so we will identify a certain pool for like each of these focus areas, and we will have that kind of pool ready for our agencies. And then as we start going through, we already have a list, we have a pipeline of these business challenges. We will groom them, we'll make them into a statement of need, and we will have a fair shot for everyone on that, in that vendor pool, to bid on it, and to provide or pitch their solutions.
Well, that sounds very exciting. Nikhil, you talked about upskilling. As you know way better than us, that this technology is moving so rapidly. It's just unbelievable. We start with generative AI, large language models, multimodal agents, you name it, open source. Llama 3 just came out, and AGI is being talked about. Uh, Talk about upskilling, because as potential people who want to join you, they want to know what opportunities are there. Now, upskilling obviously also means employees that you currently have. that what are you doing to upskill them, because it just doesn't mean, hey man, let's just hire, because there is an internal upskilling because of the transformative nature of AI. So tell us, and you talked a little bit about that. So talk a little bit
Yeah.
to us on that.
Yeah. And you're right. You're right. It's a big effort. And one of the things to, I guess, understand is like what your starting point is, and where do you choose to go as your first stop. So maybe just a common set of AI courses for anybody and everybody across the organization is like a good place to start. But then as you slowly start inching towards that level of maturity of understanding what these options are, like you and I mean, we breathe in this space, so we are constantly being updated on what's happening, what are the changes. But um, I'm still surprised at sometimes when I speak with people and they just says like it's just so overwhelming for me to keep up with anything, so I just choose not to. Right? It's like sometimes they just like it's their comfort to not just keep up with it because it just gives them anxiety because they look at it from a different perspective of a lot of commentary being fed into it as far as what it's going to do to jobs and what's going to happen and blah and blah. But over here, I mean, from a upskilling perspective, we're taking a very practical approach of everybody needs a certain level of education for about AI, right? Then we can figure out that there are certain sub groups within this larger group. For example, there are going to be people in the leadership um, cohort. There are going to be people in business, program management. And then, of course, when we get to technical, we open a completely different door towards upskilling and training. I want to roll this out within our organizations, with that intent of understanding how soon or how regularly someone needs to be updated. So yeah, we wanna take a very incremental approach towards this, and as much as possible, not really create training, but mostly curate training, because there are so many good options out there. So we want to make sure we have something that everyone can be assigned as a certain course structure or like a certain curriculum that they go through at their own pace, at their own time, but also then hold some of these workshops. So one of the example is, just employee training for using AI for augmenting what they are doing. And, like we all know that people are using Gen AI for many things, Chat GPT or whatever they have access to. But I think making them realize that you don't want to use it as is, use it as a starting point to ideate, but then take it and then work on it further. And then, it can draft an email for you, or it can give you a starting point for maybe a policy or for anything that you're trying to create. But what is a more responsible use of this technology? If a certain marketing team or communications team that uses graphics or visuals for something, they could easily leverage some of these Gen AI tools, that create visuals for them. But then also, what are some of the acceptable tools, right? Because then we want to make sure that we are covered as far as IP is concerned, as far as any level of, I would say, protection that we can guarantee, we can assure. So there are certain things that we want to make sure that we aim for in our training of just basic use. And then as we get more into specialized areas, as a state, we run obviously every environment across, AWS or Azure, Google. So we have certain teams that are focused and specialized in those particular technologies. So we want to make sure we empower them to make sure, that they have the best training available for Bedrock or any other, you know relevant technology that they can focus on. So it's really a training program that, I mean, we'll a stream of the training program that we are going to be adding to our existing training program that we have going on. So because like all of us do regular security training, so we are aware of the fact that like we need to update ourselves on a regular basis. So this is just going to be something that's added to it.
No, that's fantastic. So, curated training available for anybody at their discretion at many different levels. Just adding on additional training to what they are doing. So that's great because you're making sure that nobody gets left behind in this transformation that we are going through, Nikhil. Nikhil, that's applicable to the employees. What kind of people or talent are you looking for to add when you look at hiring for your team? So we have listeners who are ML Ops. We have even Georgia Tech graduates listening in, Carnegie, etc. Tell them what kind of people are you looking for and why. The exciting things you talked about, the innovation hub. You've talked about upskilling. We're going to talk about some other things. Why they should be coming down to the home of Coca-Cola.
um, I am still working with our HR teams in creating these roles, to be perfectly honest with you, because this has snuck up on most organizations so fast that there aren't existing job families, right? So at least for the program, I want to start out from a program management perspective, and then get more detailed into someone who understands generative, someone who understands ML, someone who understands natural language processing from a technical perspective. I think that's the part where we're going to be relying more on our private sector technical vendors to be our technical arm in working with agencies. But to be able to run the AI program, to be able to understand and curate some of these opportunities for our agencies and the private sector, I think just kind of, being more of a generalist in AI is going to be a starting point for now. And then as the program evolves, then I want to, probably branch out and scale it to getting someone in who can be an expert or who can truly advise a certain stream. So far, what I am seeing is it is easier to find someone who can come in and consult and put certain frameworks in place rather than, hopping on and jump in as like a full-time person to work with the state. But I guess that's just only because it is hard to find AI talent right now, and whatever the talent exists is pretty much um, taken by private sector, and there is no way that the state can match what they are offering. So we are aware of that, but we are kind of consciously kind of stepping into making sure that we build it as we see the need and the efficiency of it.
I would say yes. One of the reasons for doing the podcast is to make sure that we democratize the access of talent across to wonderful agencies and people like you. And I understand a lot of people want to work there, but then there are talented people like you who are working in public sector agencies because money obviously is important, but giving back and the public good also is important, and that's why you're doing it. And I think that's also a message that should go out to the people that you are engaged in some very important work, and I think that makes a big difference. And as you said, you're looking for more at this stage, more program management people while you're figuring things out. You're kind of building the plane and flying it at the same time, in a way, Nikhil, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and But there is an important aspect of what you are doing. Why are you doing it? Because I want the listeners to know why it is important to work for an agency, work for the state, because, as I said, it touches so many people.
You're absolutely right, Sanjay. I mean, this is one thing that like the fulfillment of the work that we are doing in um, seeing how it impacts people. I told you that for the longest time, I've been running digital services teams, and a big part of digital services is going out and speaking with people and talking to them about what their expectations are, what their challenges are, interacting with the state, transacting with the state. And it is sometimes just eye opening to just see, like, one of the things that we had, um, we when we were designing certain services, one of the questions from our questionnaire was, what does it mean for you to not be able to transact with the state or be able to interact with the state? It could be due to technical reasons. It could be due to the fact that, like, probably they just don't have the right devices or whatever. And one person just said it straight up. She's like, that just means, like, we probably won't have food on our table. And there are so many different levels that people interact or depend on the state. And when you start seeing just the fact, say, for example, when we work on um, information for something like food stamps, um, you have to be conscious about the fact that you are trying to educate and trying to make a service available to a certain demographic where it's very important to be very simple in your message. It's like the plain language messaging. And you complicate something at some point, like if they miss one step, then all of a sudden, like, they either don't qualify for the program or they don't get that service, and then it really affects their livelihood. Little things like, we make things for certain level of, like, say, inmates, or certain juvenile programs where it's easy to put in their grievances, because in the past, it just needed them to write something on a piece of paper and hand it to the same person that they may have a grievance against, right? So adding some of that technology in there truly protects them, changes so many things for them. And I don't think, like, many people are lucky to be able to do that outside and actually see, like, how, because we publish something, we may go and simplify certain information pieces, and we publish it. We go through a certain educational program of amplifying that service, and you start seeing uptick on that service usage, and you kind of see that, like, you're making that difference. You're actually changing certain things. I've had several people actually on my team who worked with the state, and then they went to the private sector, and after a certain number of years or whatever the time they spent out there, they came back. And they to exactly what you just said, like, yes, they were probably making more money out there, but at some point, I guess that that fulfillment that they were feeling was just not there. It started feeling empty, and money couldn't bridge that. So they decided, I was like, you know what, I'm going to come back, I'm going to keep doing this. So I think that is really more important. I feel like the state, or in most, I would say, other states as well, it gives you a chance to grow. Like, I have almost zero technical AI education, really. But I'm lucky to be given an opportunity, as working through different ranks and different responsibilities, and now I'm lucky enough to be, like, putting together this program, of course, with a lot of help from a lot of other capable people. But still, I do feel like, if someone is out there who's looking at what are their options, I would definitely say public service should not be taken off the table, because Either they think that working for any public service government entity, it just means like it's paperwork or boring, or no, this is very exciting. I am and my team, I would say, like, we always are so kicked about the things that we are doing, and I cannot stop talking about it.
Wow. Well, since you talked about your team, can you talk about the role of diversity and inclusion in your team, and why is it important for driving innovation, Nikhil?
Yeah. I mean, you're gonna have to have a diverse team to be able to cater to a diverse population, and Georgia has a significant diverse population. Like I said, Atlanta, we probably have people from all over the world living in the metro. Um, Even outside of Georgia, I would be surprised. Like I've pulled up at all of these exits across these highways where for the longest time you don't see anything but just farms, and then suddenly you're at a gas station and you come across someone who is not from Georgia. You can tell, right? And you just kind of find yourself in the midst of like such a huge diverse population, and it is important to understand that when you design something for them, like how do you represent them at the design phases. Like they need to have a seat at the table, and as much as it's great to actually go find people who can give you some feedback, but that if it's represented within the team itself, that's like battle half won right there. So I'm really happy to say, like, my team is quite diverse. It is predominantly, actually, we have more women on our team, and we have a good balance of diversity. We have always followed good inclusion practices whenever we design things. We always test it out on real people. So we don't believe in just knowing and designing, and just because, say, I have a master's in user experience design, I mean, my knowledge only can create a very good prototype, but I have to test it on people. So we go out there, and in the past we have done that, where we just go out to one of our, say, child support services agency office, and just request people to give like 5-10 minutes of their time, and just give them whatever we're working on, and see how they interact with it. And that tells us so much more than what otherwise we will just be able to come up with within a contained isolated area. So I feel like just having that diverse mindset, having that inclusive mindset, is really the oxygen of what we are creating. And I think AI will only make it more important, because it relies on people. And as much as AI can at this point um, act like it creates just as what people would create things, but the importance of having the person in the loop is very important.
So, as you said, very good points. Diversity is the oxygen for your innovation, and you really strongly encourage it and have a very diverse team. And this is, again, for our listeners to know and understand. Nikhil, how does the Georgia Technical Authority engage with the broader AI community? Do you have like any partnerships with research institutions or academic institutions or startups or anything like that?
So yeah, we actually are forming those right now. I mean, to your earlier analogy of building the plane as you're flying it, that's like one of the examples of us doing that. So GTA, the Georgia Technology Authority, being a state entity, we in the past have automatically built some partnerships with some of the other state organizations that happen to be non governmental, as in um, with our accessibility program. We partnered with Georgia Tech. They have a Center for Inclusive Design division within Georgia Tech, and it's an incredible, incredible department. And my organization and the state ADA's office and Georgia Tech, we collaborated to build our accessibility program in Georgia in the past. So they have a lot of people with limited abilities who work for them. So when we audit our digital properties for accessibility checks, it is very helpful to actually leverage the people who represent the users across that we otherwise don't have access to. Similarly, in the AI frame, we have some partnerships with Georgia Tech. We have partnerships with University of North Georgia. We have established a partnership with Georgia State. I have been part of several AI cohorts across other states and organizations where my counterparts or someone who is leading the charge of my counterpart, we get to actually share some of the challenges that we are facing, and then we talk about certain things very specific to AI. There is a organization called the National Association for State CIOs, NASCIO, and they have built an incredible community for AI practitioners. And I think everyone is relatively newer in this space, to be perfectly honest, from a public sector perspective. So we are building these relationships as we move forward, and then we participate in events. We kind of get together to brainstorm and share some of these common challenges.
Wonderful. So, a lot of partnerships, relationships with academics, with your peers that are going on. Nikhil, data, as you know, is the lifeblood of AI. How do you navigate security and privacy concerns, especially when you're working with such vast amounts of data, public data that you have?
Oh, I mean, that's honestly that's the topic for an entire episode of broadcast probably. I am thankful to be working with people who actually that's their full time job. They are the data cohorts of they stewards of these services, but we as a state, and I think that's true for most states, you will see a certain level of data maturity posture that changes based on which service, which team supports that. Georgia is a quite a decentralized federated state, so a lot of the agencies manage their own data. But it is very important to kind of make sure you have the right guardrails, you have the right tool sets to make sure that there's a certain security aspect to maintain. There is a certain hygiene aspect to maintain for data sustenance, and we are working with, again, one of the, I would say, respectable industry leaders that partner with us to make sure that that this happens. Um, Personally, I don't have that as like my immediate role as much as like I work with the folks who do that.
But there's a lot of effort and thought that has gone into it. Uh, Nikhil, within your organization, and I know you're kind of, as you said, building it out. Can you talk about either the specific AI technologies that you are utilizing or will be utilizing? This is again for your peers, whether it's machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing, etc.
I mean, just a earlier thought about data, I mean, you're right, like it's like the lifeblood, and I think AI really leans heavily on good data, because AI is not going to be successful without good data. So, we are making sure that we establish certain partnerships to make sure that whenever we work on a certain um, AI solution, that data is good and it's is taken care of. Because something that I'm seeing is like most of the AI implementations kind of come to a screeching halt because that part of the project is not completed. It is really important. As far as like what kind of technologies that we are using, I mean, we I think are going to be more focused on the problems that we aim to solve, and then whatever it takes for us to solve. And that's one of the reasons why we are looking to partner with implementation experts rather than signing up for a certain technology. I mean, I definitely envision the entire spectrum as far as the technology is concerned, like Gen AI, ML, natural language processing, because like we have such a huge component of call centers. We have such a huge component of speaking with our constituents on a daily basis. We have a large population who truly believes in like, speaking with somebody or interacting with somebody. We One of our low hanging fruit implementation when, like the whole AI wave was coming up was a chatbot on Georgia.gov where we had a old school chatbot where we had a secondary repository of answers, and then we were creating questions so that we can test it to see how well it answers, kind of like always, kind of equate that to Jeopardy. But coming up with an AI bot, I mean, we didn't have to do any of that. We just made sure that LLM is trained using the information that we have. Most of it was just like publicly available information on websites or documents, and then the bot just started having very natural conversation with Georgians, and we could see the uptick of the usage of the bot compared to what it used to be before. It just, like, yes, people know that this is a bot, but they still get something which is way more useful than what they were getting before. I feel like we are not going to be deciding on a certain technology or a certain particular direction, but it's going to be more around like what is the problem that we are solving, and with the vendor pool that we have, um, you know, through them we should be able to procure whatever it takes to kind of address that problem. You had mentioned something about open source in the past. I mean, earlier in the earlier questions. I mean, that is definitely something that we want to keep our door open to, because I'm a believer of the value of open source. Like, innovation where we are today would not be without open source. And there are so many misconceptions about open source, but we have to, at the same time, we have to be cautious about it. Like, where are we applying that towards? What are the risks that we are willing to take? To just give you one example, when I took on the job, my previous job of a chief digital officer, like one of the first things we did successfully was we just changed our entire web system from a proprietary to open source, because this is all public facing information anyways. Like, why why spend millions of taxpayer dollars in a proprietary system that is expensive to maintain, expensive to grow, plus you're completely reliant on someone else to work on a roadmap of the features that you want. But we switched that, we changed, and ever since we've been using Drupal, and we truly built something that we can use, and our agencies actually designed it along with us. So we designed it with our users. So I feel like, I mean, other than the cost saving piece of it, I feel like the value that brought in was like significantly more. So I'm a big believer of that aspect of open source. So we just have to kind of weigh it and figure it, like, from a implementation of, where do we use it.
Yeah, no, you're right. Innovation, open source. I mean, there's so much going on. As I just said yesterday, Meta just announced Llama 3 and Mistral, and there's so much going on that front. Uh, Given that, Nikhil, what you are a leader in AI in public sector, or one of the few who's got this job. What emerging trends do you see shaping the future of AI in the public sector?
In the public sector, because like one of the biggest emerging trends, I mean, what the difference between 2023 and 24 is in the multimodal aspect of AI. I mean, 24 we are seeing so many different ways that AI now is filling those voids and gaps. I think in the public sector, like any and each of that may be relevant. It really depends on like what is the use case, and what is the solution that we are looking for. But from a trend perspective, I just feel like anything that we see around us, as long as it it provides the right solution, we should be able to bank on that. I mean, just simple things like analytical AI, where like a lot of people assign a lot of negative commenting around a lot of the things as far as say face recognition systems or whatever, because I think we have also seen some dark examples of the misuse of that. But when it shows that it saves someone hours, collectively, in trying to gauge if the person standing in front of me is indeed the same person who is here to avail this service, and a system matches their face to the record that you have on your in your system. Those little incremental things like truly help someone with that confidence score. So I'm pretty positive about all of these trends that are slowly taking shape. But as an organization, as a government organization, I just want to make sure that before jumping on any of that, like we vet it through, making sure that again that implementation is ethical, that implementation is responsible and purely thought through, because like we don't get to do overs here, right? So like one little mistake and it's quite harmful for the population. So as much as I'm excited, I'm also very cautious.
Cautiously optimistic.
I'm very cautiously optimistic.
No, that's fantastic. Nikhil, there are our listeners who are, running large companies. In some cases, some state CIOs or federal CIOs. What would be your advice to them who are looking to establish a chief AI officer role or build out their AI capabilities from the lessons you have learned so far?
I think it's important to first, make sure that you align that role's success factors to your organization's goals and your organization's intended outcomes. It is probably very tempting to get someone in that role who has an awareness, a technological awareness of all the things that can happen, but we want someone who asks the question why, right? Like we want someone to start that conversation from the why space of like, why are we doing this? It's very easy to get roped into buying a solution and then start looking for a problem. But this role really needs to be that partner um, to the business leaders within the organization, to the technology leaders within the organization, the product leaders within the organization, because today we are recognizing AI as a standalone thing. I mean, in the near future, I'm pretty sure most everything that we touch will have some or the other AI component to it. Remember when Internet of Things was a thing? I know how quickly that faded. Um, Similarly, we are already seeing gadgets come out, right? Like a pin that you wear that just like records every conversation that you have. Although its starting point is to record everything unless you actually ask it not to record, right? So we are seeing wearables, we are seeing AI now being part of different things. So it won't be too late until like I mean having AI in almost anything and everything that we use will be around us. The smartness of devices is going to be all around us. So it's really the conversation about why are we doing this, and then how effectively, how responsibly are we doing this is really the key. I feel like with so much resources and so many educational opportunities out there. I mean, we're already seeing like gazillion AI courses being advertised, and AI in this, AI in that, and AI in design thinking. Like, so everyone's like trying to rope in that AI factor. So the AI piece of this role is probably going to be as much important as the overall understanding of like, why are we doing this, how we are implementing it, and how is this going to be sustainable for the organization. So I feel like having that lens, having that view is going to be very important.
So, for our listeners who are looking to bring on chief AI officers, Nikhil says, understand why are we doing it? Are we doing it ethically? Are we doing it responsibly? And make sure the person can talk to the product people, can talk to the business people, can talk to the technical people. So, uh, they need to have that kind of understanding. Is that a correct summarization, Nikhil?
Absolutely. That person really needs to be the glue across all these other roles within an organization.
So get a sticky glue there. Uh, Nikhil, at the end, we do basically a lightning round of questions, just very, very brief. This is again for our listeners who want to know, and these are some of the questions that they said to ask you. Um, can you tell our listeners if there is any book, newsletter, podcast, or resource that you would recommend to someone who wants to know about AI or get to be really smart quickly or become a chief AI officer?
Yeah, I can definitely recommend some. There are so many, to be perfectly honest with you, Sanjay.
Just
I
one or
mean,
two. Yeah,
my
we could spend half an hour. Just one or two.
right, my weekend consumed by so much of the AI stuff that I do. But something that I regularly listen to is This Day in AI. It's a podcast. I'm more of a
This
auditory learner, so I think another one is Practical AI. Um,
okay.
I think a couple ones that I think like the AI breakdown. There are several, but these are some of the ones that I kind of gravitate to because some of them actually talk about implementations and the purpose behind it. Some of them are purely based on just giving updates about what is the most recent fanciness that's happened, and what does that mean.
Right.
And then a couple of them also that touch upon some of the policy side of it. So, for example, when EU rolled out their AI, legislation, like there were some good podcasts around, like what does that mean, and what can we learn from it.
Wonderful. So there are some. You're more an auditory learner. Some great podcasts that you talked about. Um, What's the one piece of advice you'd wish you'd gotten when you were just starting out on this role in AI?
I mean, I'm still much, I feel like I'm still starting out and very eager for any advice that I can get. So I know you have such a wide listener base, so my contact is out there, and I'm always eager to learn. But I think starting out, it always is helpful to just kind of for someone to put together like the overall ecosystem of AI. I mean, I feel like I had to kind of put together every brick and brick, and as in when these models were released, and then Bard became something else, and something else became something else. That picture just keeps changing. So I feel like there isn't really a snapshot that you can take, and then you can be like, well, start with this, right? But if someone is wanting to do this today, I would definitely say that like just find something or someone who can just you know I would say take you through that journey of like how we came about here. I mean, simple things, right? I mean, we don't think about like the Turing models and the captures that contributed towards like you and me, actually like teaching the AI models by Google, right? We actually showed them what sidewalks look like, what crosswalks look like, what lights look like, right? And we essentially trained those models, right? So we came a long way, and it's important for them to understand because like going forward, when we start again, kind of asking for a certain input from our users, we need to understand again, like at what level we should be asking, what level should we stop in and stuff. So I feel like the the ethical piece of AI is equally important as the technical piece of AI. And where we are today, I do feel like I'm glad that the ethical conversation is being had across several state capitals and at the federal level, which didn't happen just for technology, right? I mean, there's so many reasons in the past to have had that conversation, but we didn't. but that is important and that needs to be had. So I feel like it. If I were to go back, I would have loved for someone to just kind of show me some of these starting points. That would have saved me so much time and so many of my weekends.
So someone who could have showed you some starting points, and as you said, the ethical piece is as important as the technical point. And he did tell you listeners that if you have advice, you know how to get hold of him, and you can reach out to him. Final question for you, Nikhil. If you could have dinner or a conversation with any AI luminary, living or dead, who would that be?
Nobody.
Oh,
I
nobody.
would.
Okay. Okay.
I enjoy written pieces. I just never
Okay.
felt like, oh, I should hang out with this person. I think that that feeling I can always save for the people who enjoy my interests in some of the social spaces that we talked in the previous podcast we talked about. But I mean to be perfectly honest with you, anyone who is making a difference. And I wouldn't say that, like, so I mean, I'm like, oh, Sam Altman or like whoever, like whatever. Yes, I mean, they have done great work. They have done a lot of work in this space. But truly, someone who is solving problems, someone who is implementing solutions that are solving social problems. I would be a big fanboy of those people, and would love to learn
Okay.
from them of, like, how they're doing things, what they're doing, what they learned, what they wish they did different.
Great answer. It doesn't have to be AI, just somebody who's figuring out how to solve problems. Nikhil, this has been truly an insightful conversation. From talking about your journey to your insights on the challenges and opportunities with the AI implementation, you provide us as such a wealth of knowledge. And really thankful to you for taking the time to join us today, and really wish you continued success as you're flying the plane for Georgia to make it the AI capital. And really, your vision is inspirational. And I hope more people continue looking at Georgia for an opportunity. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the CIO podcast, where we really uncover stories behind the leaders who are driving AI innovation forward. So stay tuned for more captivating conversations with chief AI officers from across industries. Nikhil, thanks again. This was fantastic. I could have gone on and on. There were so many other topics, as always, with you, but thanks for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. I really appreciate. It's an honor to be on your podcast, and I've always found your podcast to be so inspiring. There's so many fantastic stories, and I mean, I should have said, oh, your podcast really is also one of the podcasts that I
No,
listen
no, no.
to.
It
Like,
was not.
as far as,
I was not
but
pitching. I was not pitching for that.
I
This was
know that would
no,
have sounded like a very obvious plug,
no,
but now that we are not talking about my podcast list, I should say that, from a landscape perspective, definitely, the Chief AI Officer podcast should be some on people's list.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. It's such a pleasure. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.